Welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial. It's a tutorial of NSPanel ESPHome, Nextion Editor, complete tutorial. That's the aim. So we'll see if we make it there. But this is part 2. Part 1 was the inspirational episode, and I'm ready for part 2 now. We'll start off with the agenda. I should probably put it up somewhere here with some bullet words. We will start off with prerequisites, the things and softwares that I'm using when I'm working with this project, the things you need if you want to work with this project. 2, a couple of flashing tips that I would like to share with you that I think makes my life a lot easier when working with this project. 3, functional chain. I love functional chains. You know, where you try to describe the signal's way from one end to the other, from a touch on the screen to a light bulb actually turning on and off, from a light bulb actually turning on and off to the screen updating itself to the state of that light bulb. I want to try to paint the overall picture so you get a basic understanding about how this actually works, this project, and the parts that are included. And I actually bought a Wacom pen tablet because I thought, like, if you're doing tutorials, you're a YouTuber, you need a tablet so you can paint functional chains. So I'm gonna do that. I hope you like it. We'll see. Part 4, the Nextion Editor software, will be the last part of this episode. I will go through the entire software as much as I've learned about it so far, and we will go through my HMI file, and we will not go through each and every button because a lot of them works exactly the same. We will go through or focus on the different methods that I'm using to push data to ESPHome. And the purpose of that is to give you as many tools as possible for you to use when starting your own NSPanel ESPHome project. So that's the agenda for this episode. We will look at the YAML file a bit in this episode. My plan for now is to cover the YAML file in the last part, in part 3. We will have to look at the YAML file a bit today, just checking it against the Nextion Editor and stuff like that. So that's the plan. We'll see if it's a good plan or not. I think we should just crack on. Okay. Oh, just one thing that I forgot. Just want to show you my setup for this episode. I've set up the camera so we have lights in like 4 different rooms. So I'm just going to show you if you've forgotten about what the NSPanel works like. So kitchen first. I'm turning the kitchen table lights off, pressing now. If you look at the mirror to my left, to your right, in the bedroom, you'll see a bit of the kitchen sink table light. Good. Switching to living room. I think you can see a living room light in the picture on the wall. Turning that off. Okay. Turning it on. Entering living room. Unmuting TV. Cool. The TV there. Stereo. Okay. Off. Cool. Going back. Switching to bedroom. Oh no. Got it. Table lights. Nice. Entryway, ceiling lights. Wow. Bathroom, can't see the bathroom. Back to kitchen. Okay, I just wanted to show you that setup. First off, prerequisites. What do you need to work with this project? I will start off by showing you this. You need this thing. It's a USB to serial thing that you need to flash the NSPanel with ESPHome. I will put a link in the description to one of these. You must have one of these if you're working with projects like this. Definitely. Okay. You need a working installation of ESPHome. I'm running Linux and I've installed ESPHome in Linux. I don't actually remember how I did it, but I started in the terminal like this. Boom. It starts, and then you go to the web browser. You enter localhost 6052. There's your ESPHome server. I'll put some kind of link in the description as well to some installation guide of installing ESPHome. I'm using it like that. You need to have Nextion Editor installed. It's a Windows software. So my solution to that was that I installed VirtualBox. I've never used it before, but it's really nice. So yeah, it's a VirtualBox and it's a virtual installation of Windows 10, and it looks like this. So yeah, it works really good, and then I just get the files from that VirtualBox to my Linux machine, and yeah, we'll look at that. You need some kind of HTTP server if you're running Home Assistant. You already have that, I think. Same for OpenHAB. I had a bit of issues using my HTTP server in OpenHAB, so I just installed a super simple HTTP server on Linux, and it looks like this. You start it in the terminal. It's called HTTP server. Start it. And there you have your HTTP server. And you need it to put your HMI files, because the Nextion display needs an HTTP server to reach out to and download the HTTP file. That's why you need it. And this server is super easy. So you put the files in home, public, and if you enter the localhost blah 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 8080 maybe, or what was it? Yeah. So you get the public folder there. Really good, really easy. You need some kind of flashing tool to be able to flash the NSPanel with ESPHome. You can use ESPHome to flash NSPanel, but I've actually been using ESPFlasher, and that's the tool that Chris Masto shows you in the link that I will put in the description. I think it just goes a bit faster for me when I use ESPFlasher, and I'll show you that in my flashing tips part of this video. It's good to have some kind of home automation server if you want to be able to control something with your NSPanel. I'm using OpenHAB. You might as well use Home Assistant. Last thing you need is an MQTT broker, at least if you're doing the solution that I'm doing. If you're using Home Assistant, you might not use an MQTT broker. You use the native ESPHome Home Assistant API thing, which sounds really nice and easy. As I'm using OpenHAB, I have to use another solution, so that's the MQTT broker. That's the prerequisites. Just get them all, get it working, and you're ready to go. Let's continue with some flashing tips. Flashing tips. Start with opening the cover. I think I already unscrewed the screws here, so just pop this open like that. Remove this thing. This thing is also really easy to remove. Boom, like that. In a lot of flashing tutorial videos, I think they recommend you to remove this entire green card from the cover by opening this thing up like this, choof, and then you remove this entire cord here, so you're able to remove the green card from the cover. But it's just a pain in the ass, and it takes a lot of time. And the reason why you would like to remove the entire card before using your flashing equipment is because when you take your flashing cables and you put them in these holes here, there's a risk of you touching the back, which is some kind of metal plate, and then you will short circuit the wire. So if you do that, you can't flash. I've tried it, you can't. But my solution to this is to do like this instead. First off, just looking at this USB to serial thing. The wiring is not hard. You just have to put ground to ground on the NSPanel, voltage to voltage. It's receive to transmit and transmit to receive. That's not hard. And then the fifth cable goes into the fifth hole. That's called, I think it's called IO or something. Yeah, it's the one that's left, and that is supposed to sit in the ground. So that's not hard. So when you put that together, it's a good thing to just tape it together on the other side, so you don't have to check which cable is which all the time. Every time I flash, I don't have to think about the wiring. I know that this cable is the IO, the fifth hole, so I just need to make sure that that is on the right side when I put it down in the holes. So to my fantastic flashing tip then. If you just push the cables down like this, straight down, you will short circuit the wiring because it's some kind of metal plate behind. But if you do like this instead, you just push them down and then you tilt it a bit. You're not going to short circuit it because you've raised the cables a bit from that metal plate behind. So what I like to do when I flash it like 100 times a day, I just put it down like this. I put the cables down, I tilt it a bit, lift the green card up. I take the USB cable and I put the USB cable in, and I prepare the software on the computer. I prepare the flashing file and then just press flash. And using ESP Flasher, it takes like, I don't know, 20 seconds or something. So which tool to flash with then? I was talking about that you could flash with either ESPHome or ESP Flasher, that's another tool. Using ESPHome, I'll put the cables in, I'll lift the card up, put the USB cable in, shoof, and press edit, install, plug into this computer, choose USB, there you go, connecting. The downside of using this method, is that it takes longer, or you have to sit longer tilting the card, because it creates the bin file first and then starts uploading. If you're using ESP Flasher tool, you create the bin file in ESPHome first, and you can have a coffee while the bin file is created, and then you use ESP Flasher just to upload the tool, and then you just have to tilt this card for like 15 seconds or something. So that's the difference. Now it takes a while, you see. If I let go of this tilting thing, we will see that it short circuits, device disconnected, can't do it. So you really have to tilt it, can't push the cables down in that metal thing in behind. No good. Close. Looking at the difference with using ESP Flasher, you would press edit, install, manual download. Then you can just sit and watch, grab a coffee while this bin file is created. You save it, and then you upload it with ESP Flasher. Open the file, make sure the cables are down, you lift the card, update this thing, choose USB there, flash ESP, and it basically starts uploading straight away. You don't have to wait for the bin file to be created. Perfect, complete flashing. So then you know, just remove the USB cable. Boom. Yeah, that's my fantastic flashing tip. Just don't make it harder than that. Don't pick things to pieces. You don't have to do that, and you don't have to worry about short circuiting it, I think. I mean, I've done it a lot of times. I'm just trying again, and it works the next time. So yeah, that's my tip. Let's move on. Time for functional chains. As you can see, I have the pen right here, the Wacom tablet ready. I'm going to try and visualize it in two ways. First, with a beautiful picture, hopefully, and then later with the actual files and the settings in the files, the YAML file, the TFT file, and all that. Let's start with the picture first. We have the NSPanel right here. All right. So the NSPanel is basically two things. It's a screen. Yeah, I love this. And some kind of ESP card. I don't know. You know, like ESP32. That's why we can flash it with the ESPHome. I don't know more about the ESP card or what it is, but yeah, there's some kind of ESP card. The screen itself needs a TFT file. So we need to upload a TFT file to the Nextion screen. We'll come to that later. The ESP card, we're using ESPHome, right? So we're flashing the ESP card with ESPHome. Write it like that. And when working with ESPHome, we are using YAML files. So we'll write that down here as well. YAML file. So basically, the TFT file is put on the Nextion screen in that memory, and the YAML file is flashed onto the memory of the ESP card. Starting with the TFT file then. So in the TFT file, you could have a bunch of buttons and sliders and pictures or whatever. So in this example, we have created a button in the TFT file. It's to control a light bulb. So we'll have a little icon on it showing a light bulb. How do you paint a light bulb? Yeah, that's a light bulb. Okay, so right now, I'm touching my ceiling lights here in the kitchen. That's the button in this example. So I'm turning it off now. Boom. What is actually going on here? So someone touches. We'll try to paint a hand here. Oh man. Yeah, that's a finger. Someone touches the button. In the Nextion Editor, we've told that when this button is pressed, we want that event to be sent to ESPHome. So we have a function there called kind of send event. That means that every time someone touches this button, that event is sent to ESPHome. Whoops. So we'll do a line like that. So touch, event goes to ESPHome. All right. So now ESPHome knows that someone has touched this button. In the ESPHome YAML file, we've set up a MQTT client that connects to my MQTT broker that I have on the server. In the YAML file, we also set up that as soon as the event is received by ESPHome, we want a message to go out to the MQTT broker on a specific topic. So we'll put in the MQTT broker here, which the client is connected to already. Broker. Button is pressed, event received by ESPHome. ESPHome says, okay, I want to send a message to the MQTT broker. Sends a message. The message is on a specific topic, and the message could be kitchen on, for example. Then we need this message to get to our home automation server, right? So our home automation server also has to have a MQTT client connection to the broker. So we'll put in a OpenHAB MQTT client here as well. Boom. And in MQTT, you subscribe to different topics to receive messages, and the setup is basically just that all the topics that our MQTT client in ESPHome sends messages to, our OpenHAB MQTT client should subscribe on. So in this case, OpenHAB is subscribing to this topic that we're sending kitchen on to, and will therefore receive that message from the broker. And as soon as OpenHAB receives that message on the broker, OpenHAB will make sure that that is transmitted to the light bulb on in whatever way. It could be a Wi-Fi light bulb, a Zigbee light bulb, or whatever, but the message will get to the light bulb. Good. So we've now looked at the signals way from touching the screen to a light bulb actually turning on. But what would happen if that same light was changed from somewhere else, from another screen, voice control, Zigbee button on the wall, circadian light, or whatever? How does the screen know to rewrite itself? It doesn't. So that's the second part of this project. You always need to tell the screen to update itself on state changes. Otherwise, we're not going to have an updated screen with the current states on all the smart things. Changing colors, looking at that example instead. So we have a Zigbee button here on the wall instead. Someone touches it with its little finger. Nice. The light will turn off. Boom. As soon as something changes in the smart home, the home automation system will get that state change. Boom. And we've set up OpenHAB to transmit messages to the MQTT broker on all state changes. So the OpenHAB MQTT client, as soon as it gets a state change that the light has turned off, it sends a kitchen off command to the MQTT broker. The same way as OpenHAB has set up a lot of subscriptions to be able to listen to messages that come from ESPHome. In ESPHome, we need to set up subscriptions to be able to receive messages, all the messages that comes from OpenHAB. So in this case, we've set up that subscription, and therefore the MQTT broker will transmit that message to the ESPHome MQTT client. And then in the YAML file, we say that as soon as we receive a message on this specific MQTT topic, we need to send a message from ESPHome to the Nextion screen, telling it to update the button state according to the message that we received. Simple as that. Yeah, that's how it works. That's my way of trying to describe how you need to think when working with this project. Now we're going to look at the same example, but using Nextion Editor and the YAML file, and looking through the specific parts that we need to set up to get this example working. We'll try to follow this example. So looking at the screen then and the TFT file, we need to open the Nextion Editor and find some kind of button, right? So this is what it looks like, the Nextion Editor software. We'll go through everything soon, But we'll start with this basic sample. We'll go into kitchen and we'll just take this egg boiler button as the example. So this is the button that we're pressing. Touching this button gives us some settings down here called touch press event and touch release event. And as you can see, this box is ticked in here, send component ID, and here as well, send component ID. That means that as soon as we touch the egg boiler button, a message that it has been pressed and that it has been released, when we release it, will be sent to ESPHome. What will be sent is the component ID, and that is basically a unique number for that component in the TFT file in the Nextion Editor. So looking at this attribute settings here, we see an ID. It's called 7. So ESPHome will know that button 7 has been pressed on the display. So going back to this then, the button has been pressed, a message of the component ID is sent to ESPHome. Let's look at ESPHome now then. Looking at here's ESPHome, and this is the YAML file that is currently uploaded to this NSPanel, and we'll start by looking at the log wirelessly. And I would like to see how it looks like when pressing the egg button. I'm pressing it now. So here's the event. Page 4, component 7, press. Page 4, component 7, release. So if I hold it, just says press, right? And I release, now we get the release event. Okay, looking at this again, we're here now. The message that component has been pressed and released has been sent here to ESPHome. And we said that, and we have an MQTT client set up in ESPHome, and that as soon as that message is received, we want a message to be sent to the broker. So we'll try to find that in the YAML file. And we know that it was the egg boiler right here. So yeah, here's that button. It says page 4 here, component 7. Going back to Nextion Editor, we can see that it's on page 4 and it's ID 7. So basically, to make things happen when someone touches the display is that we have to have a Nextion component in the YAML file with the corresponding page ID and component ID that the button we just pressed. And to make things happen, we use this little thing here called on release. So when ESPHome gets that message, component ID 7 has been released, we want this code to execute. This is pretty basic, so we're just saying that if the state is currently 1, we want to transmit a message to the MQTT broker saying egg boiler 0, that means off. And if that's not the case, that is already off, we want to send message on. And this is the topic that we're sending the message on to the MQTT broker. So the MQTT client just sent a message to the MQTT broker, and OpenHAB hopefully gets that message. So we'll just quickly look at it. OpenHAB, we'll go into things, and I'll search for one of my MQTT things, and I think it's here, NSPanel switches. I've set up all the components. We can look at channels. Here we find the egg boiler, configure channel. So here's the same topic, state topic and a command topic, and on value should be 1, and 0 value or off value should be 0. And what that means is that as soon as this egg boiler thing is called things in OpenHAB gets a message on the topic that I've set up, it will send that message to the item that I connected to that thing. So in this case, I connected the item egg boiler. Pressing the display here, we will see that the message goes through to OpenHAB. Back to this one, so we just saw that a message got from the broker to the OpenHAB MQTT client, and OpenHAB made sure that that message got to the light bulb, but in this case it was a Zigbee outlet, which I have an egg boiler connected to. That's one way. Let's look at it the other way around. How does the screen update itself when, in this example, we're using OpenHAB to control the egg boiler? So this button is this button in OpenHAB. Looking at the screen, I don't know if you can see it, but I'll turn it off now, and this display is magically updated. That's amazing, but how does it work? Okay, we'll look at the painting again. Someone presses a button in OpenHAB. The egg boiler switch is killed with a Zigbee message. As soon as that happens, OpenHAB will get that state change. Looking at the configuration of this channel again in OpenHAB, we can see that we have both a state topic and a command topic. And the command topic says here, an MQTT topic that this thing will send a command to. If not set, this will be a read-only switch. So if I haven't set this, a message to the MQTT broker will never be sent. But as I've set it, the message will be sent as soon as the state changes. Yeah, and I didn't tell you that before, but this is the state topic, is for receiving messages. So that's used when someone touches the display and the message is sent from the ESPHome to this topic. OpenHAB receives it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that OpenHAB needs to send a command to this corresponding item. So you have to set that option down here, is command, if the received MQTT value should not only update the state of linked items, but command them. Enable this option. So I've enabled these options for all of the items that I control with the NSPanel. You have to do that. Where were we? OpenHAB receives a state change, and because we set this option, OpenHAB will send a message updating the state to the MQTT broker. For this to be received in ESPHome, we need to have an MQTT subscription set up there as well. So we'll look at that. Let's try and find the MQTT subscriptions. This is the button component, and here's the MQTT subscribe component. And as you can see here, we've said that the topic for this MQTT subscribe component is kitchen egg boiler. Wow, it's the same as in OpenHAB, right? So that's the topic that OpenHAB sends a message to. We're listening to it, we're subscribing to it, we will get the message to ESPHome, but what will happen when we get the message? That's decided under on value. So that means as soon as we get a value here, you want to do this. We want to set a component value, kitchen.begg x. What does that mean? Kitchen begg, what's that? That's the name of the component in the Nextion Editor. Let's look at the Nextion Editor. Okay, so kitchen, that's the page. It's a global component. We'll talk about that later. So first off, kitchen, page, b_egg. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. Kitchen, that's a page. begg, name of the component on that page. And x in this case is just the received value that got in on the MQTT subscription topic. So basically what we're doing is that as soon as we receive a value, we want to send an attribute change to this specific button. Looking at that specific attribute, it says set component value. Going into the Nextion Editor again. Whoop. So what we're actually changing is down here, attributes for this button. There's an attribute called value, right? So if we receive 1, it will change to 1, right? Cool. And if we receive 0, it will change to 0. That's amazing. Finishing this, we received a message in the ESPHome. ESPHome sends a command to the screen referring to this button. Change the attribute value to 0 or 1, depending on what we received. Functional chain done. I hope it didn't confuse you too much. I hope you got a bit better understanding about how this works, how the YAML file and the TFT file works together, or maybe more about how the Nextion screen and the ESP card transfers data back and forth to update the screen and so on. We'll continue now with the last part of this episode, the Nextion Editor software, and I will try to tell you everything that I know so far about the Nextion Editor software and how it works and how I created my HMI file. Just need to take a break now, have some lunch, get some more energy, and I'll be back. See ya. Hi, I'm back, had some lunch, feeling happy. We'll just need some coffee and we'll make use of the NSPanel. Of course, just follow me. Good. Okay. So this is my little coffee machine here.
Cannot authorize new brew. Water valve is closed.
Oh, man.
Open it and try again.
That was on purpose, because I just wanted to show you a fantastic thing here. Open the water valve, boom, try again. Turns green, that's because the speaker is unavailable. Let's try that again, because the speaker should be available now.
Coffee brewer is prepared for the next brew.
Right.
Standard cups is set to 4.
I don't want 4, I want 3. Boom.
Coffee is coming up.
Oh man, I forgot that one. Whew. Okay, I'll be back when the coffee is done. Alright, enough of coffee and stuff. Let's talk about the Nextion Editor software. It's a Windows software, so you need Windows, and I don't have that, so I'm running Windows on VirtualBox. And there, on my Windows installation, I have installed Nextion Editor. Let's start it up. Nextion, make graphical user interface easier. Yeah. I really enjoy working in this software. Actually, I love it. It's fun. Before starting my HMI project, I would just like to show you what it looks like when you create a new one. There's a couple of settings that you need to choose. So if you would create a new project for the NSPanel, you press New. You call it something, New Project, and then you have to choose correct display. This is important, and it's called Discovery NX4832F035. This is the one that you should use when creating a project for the NSPanel, and display direction should be 270 horizontal. Press OK, and then we'll end up with a clean, empty project. Good. We'll open my project instead. Open, and it's just called HMI, and this is what that looks like. And we can go in here straight away just to see that I have those settings in here as well. 270 horizontal and discovery, and this one. Okay, good. I'll start with just going through the menus from top to bottom. Up here, it's not much. You create new things, you save things, and you create the TFT file. So when you're done, you press TFT file output, and Nextion Editor creates a TFT file, and it's a TFT file that has to be uploaded or downloaded to the Nextion display. Under tools here, we have some tools for importing different things into the project. The only thing that I've been using that I know of is a font generator. So all the different fonts that you want to use in the HMI file, you have to kind of create and import to the file. Looking at tools here, the only thing that I have been using so far is the font generator. This display does not support movies of any kind. And this picture box, I'm not really sure. You import pictures here, but I haven't used that because I'm importing pictures the way down here. So I'm not sure about the differences there actually. But for a font, for example, if you want fonts text in your HTML file, you need to create them and import them into the project. So you have to specify which font and which size you want for it, and then you have to generate it. And when you generate it, it gets into the TFT file eventually. And if you look down here, you can look at all the fonts that are included right now in the project. So these are the fonts that you can use for displaying text. If you, of some reason, would like to change font when someone touched the screen, the font must be in the TFT file. So I guess that's why you have this method of importing things that will exist in the TFT file later. Going back to pictures, and as I said, I have not been using this thing to import pictures. I'm not sure what the difference is. I've been using this one. So all the pictures that you want to use for your project, you have to import them, and then they will end up here with an ID, a unique ID for all the pictures. So these are all the pictures that I'm using currently in my project. Settings, I have actually never been into this menu, so yeah, I haven't done anything there. Help, the instruction set is actually super useful. I have been using that a lot. I've opened it in my browser here. So this is the next instruction set. So it says a lot about what you can do and what commands to use and stuff like that. So very, very useful. This menu bar here is some basic functionalities. You can copy, cut things. You can lock specific components. If I want to lock this one, yeah, you lock it and you can't move it, I guess. No. Unlock. Delete, undo, redo, basic stuff. One thing that I use is to remove the ID, so to get a cleaner picture to see what it actually looks like. Some zooming options. One thing that I'm using is the compile button, so pressing compile will make sure that you don't have any errors in your project. So scrolling down, 0 errors, compile successful. That means you can put out a TFT file. Another thing that I use a lot is a debugger. So pressing that one will kind of start a simulation of your project, which is super useful. And I guess we're gonna end up here later on during this tutorial. So here you can, for example, just change to page 4. Yeah, okay, so this is page 4, and then you can see how that behaves in the simulation. So you can test the things that you've done here. It's really good. Closing that. Here are some tools just to work with components in your project. Bring something up, down, alignment tools, horizontal, vertical stuff. This one is kind of important, so we'll press that one. Some general code, global code. You can create global variables, for example. The following code is only run once when power on, and it's generally used for global variable definition and power on initialization data. So this is, when you create a project, this is standard in the project file. This is a parameter that I got from watching Christopher Masto's video, and this fixes some bug, I think, with the European version, because mine was a bit weird. When you touched it, the touch was a bit offset. Putting this in, remove that issue. So now the touch is very on point. You touch where you touch. Yeah. Start on page 0. Okay. Here's the toolbox. Here are all the available components for this Nextion display. Scrolling down, we'll see a few that are grayed out. So depending on which Nextion display you have, different components are available. So for example, this one cannot handle video. It would be cool to have a display that can handle that as well. It would be fun. I will talk about most of these because I have most of these in my project. So we'll go through them soon. We've talked about that. These are the pictures and the fonts that are currently in the projects that are available to use on the components and on the pages. Here we can see all the pages that are currently in the project. I have 12 pages right now. Just click through them a bit. I have some tools move down, move up, create new pages, stuff like that. Copy. Scrolling down a bit, looking at this one, this is an important menu, the attributes menu. For example, we can press this one. It's a text component, so one of these, text. Okay, looking at that one, we have all the data on this component. Different components, different amount of attributes. But for example, this one, it has an attribute called text. Changing that one, hello, will change the text on the display. Last menu, the event menu, very important one as well. We'll just choose this component. This menu right here gives us the opportunity to create code that executes on these events. So if I put code here, that would execute on the touch press event. Putting code here would be executed on the release event, for example. Looking at this component instead, I have some code that executes when this button is released. So yeah, that's some code there. We can actually just check that out on page 2. We open the debugger. Debug. We'll go to page 2. Oh man, okay, so that component is not visible at that time, but we could bring that up. Let's see, what is it called? It's called bpower. Solve that by writing visible. That's a command for hiding, showing a component. And the component is called bpower. I know that. 1 show. Okay. Need to touch the screen. Try that again. Okay. So now we have the component visible. Looking at what the code that was written there. Pressing will execute that code. It will look like this. Woo! Cool. So yeah, that's an example of code being executed. There's a quick walkthrough of the menus. Now I would like to go through a very basic thing about my HMI files. So looking at the pictures, just scrolling through the pictures, you can see that all the pictures basically that I use are pictures of the entire display. These 2 pictures are the exception, I guess. So these are kind of icon size pictures, but all the other pictures are, the resolution of those pictures are as big as the Nextion display, okay? This tells us something about the method that I'm using to rewrite specific parts of the screen. And I want to show you that because you can do this in different ways. Basically, for each page, I have 2 pictures. So starting with home page here, I have 2 pictures. This is the first one. Looks like this. It's when everything is off, no button is pressed. I call it homepage off, for example. This is the second picture for that page, and I call that homepage off. And this picture includes what it would look like if all the buttons that are on this page would be pressed. All the components that could be on are on. And these 2 speaker icons has appeared instead of the Kelvin and the brightness icons on picture 1. We can use the debugger again to see what that looks like when you've set it up that way. We go to page 2. Pressing this one, you can see that it only rewrites that part of the screen. The same here, the same here. So what it does, it changes the picture on that specific part where the button is situated. This is a 2-state button, so it changes until you press it again. It changes back. Same here, here, here. When you press it, change the picture, release, changes the picture again. Closing that one. What is actually happening is that an attribute is changed. Choosing this button, for example, looking at the attributes, you see the size of the button. Looking at this setting here, you have to use crop image to be able to do this. You could use solid color, then it's just a color on the button. You can choose the color that you want, or you could use image. That would be if you had a small icon image that you wanted to use on that button. You could do that as well. But I'm using the crop method, and where you say that pick number 1 should be ID1, and then you reference that to the picture library here. So ID1 should be pick 1, picture 2 should be ID2, and that's this one. So what is happening here is that in the background we actually have the entire image. Just it's a picture, trough, and it covers the entire screen, and it's right here. And on top of that we have all these buttons. Choosing this one, we've said that when no one is pressing it, we want picture number 1 to be seen on this area. When someone is pressing it, we want picture number 2 to be written on this area. So if I change this, for example, to, I don't know, 6, okay, we're seeing parts of image ID 6 here. Changing it to 7. Okay, so we understand how it works, hopefully. Can switch to another type of button and show you kind of the same thing. This is a dual state button, something that can be on or off. It works pretty much the same way. We have the crop image setting set here. We have picture 16 and 17. Checking that, looking at those pictures. This is picture number 16 and 17. But since this is a dual state button, it works in a different way. It works with the attribute value. So changing the value from off, 0, to on, 1, will rewrite the picture. Changing back to value 0. And the same here, you could write a weird picture and it would be super weird. Changing the value to 1 now would give me a coffee cup. Yeah, that's a bit weird. That's a bit of the basic concept of pictures and buttons and rewriting just small parts of the screen. Having said that, I feel that I would like to start over a bit and just go through page by page and go through the different components that I use on each page and the different settings, screensaver settings that I have on the pages and so on. So we'll just go through from page 0 to the last page and we'll see what happens. Okay, page 0, it's just an empty page with a black background color. And I was getting a bit confused because looking at this, I don't have any code to change page. So I was like, how does it even move on from that page to another? But I realized I have that in my YAML file. So we'll just quickly look at the YAML file to see that. And it's in the bottom. We have a connection to the Nextion display, so when the NSPanel boots up, it connects to the Nextion display. And on setup, I'm saying go to page boot screen. Okay, and page boot screen is this one. I did that because I want a dim up effect when the NSPanel starts. So as soon as ESPHome initializes the screen, ESPHome changes to the boot screen. We're on the boot screen, okay. Looking at the event menu down here, we see that in the pre-initialize event, I have a code saying dim 0. It makes the screen go completely black. So when we change a page, we have a pre-initialization phase, and that's before components on that page are refreshed. After the components on the page has refreshed, we have the post-initialization phase. So dim 0, pre-initialize event, components, refresh. The only component I have on this page is my background picture. It says OpenHab, the OpenHab logo. So that refreshes, and then with the post-initialization phase, where I have a bit of code, just it's a loop, and it dims the screen up for like, I don't know, 10 seconds or something. DP means display page 2. So when it has dimmed up for a couple of seconds to 100%, it goes to page 2. Whoop. Page 2, this is my start page, but it looks a bit weird now, right? Because looking at the start page, it doesn't look the way it looks in the Nextion Editor. Why is that? That's because these two buttons should normally not be seen. They're set to be not shown during the pre-initialization phase of the page change. So if you look at the page setting pressing the background will get us to the page setting. Looking at the pre-initialize event phase, we can see that we have a bit of code here saying p event 0. 0 means not shown. So if we do like that, it says state 0, hide, 1, show. We want those buttons to be hidden. And looking at the device ID, so this is the P event, this is the B power, this is the J load. So those are the three components that we want to be hidden when the page is loaded. And we want them to be visible sometimes when specific events occur. And one of those examples is my doorbell. Pressing that one, it becomes visible because we changed that setting to P event 1. And it was ESPHome sending that command to the Nextion screen. Now the door just unlocked itself. Another event, pressing this button will get us that no power button. Right. Amazing. So that's how it works. We can just remove those so we don't have to see them. Do like that. So we remove them now. We can remove all the device IDs so it's a bit cleaner. So this is our start page and what it looks like. Let's go through different components from top to bottom. In the top we have a text component. If you would like to have a text component, you just press here, text, and you get a text component. And then you configure it the way you want it. And I think these attributes are pretty self-explanatory. I'll remove that one. Just look at this one. So this is basically just, I have OpenHab sending temperature states to the MQTT broker, and the NSPanel or the ESPHome updates the screen. Same with the time. I have a time component in ESPHome, and so it doesn't come from OpenHab or anything. It's just ESPHome keeping track of the time, updating the screen. The text component. Set from top to bottom, but we'll continue with these two buttons because since they have text on them, but they're not text components, they're buttons, right? So if you would like a button, you go here and you press button. And we can see what kind of button it is. This is a type 98, and these are also 98. So those are straightforward buttons. Looking at this one, it's a type 53. So that means it's a dual state button. Looking at that one, it says type 53. Yeah, it says dual state button there as well. Just so we know the difference. And as you know, this button tells us which room we're currently in. Pressing the button enters that room and changes the page. In this case, if we would press kitchen, we would change page to kitchen and we would get this page on the screen. Okay, we can see then if we have anything that sends us to that page by pressing the kitchen button. So looking here, we see that there's no code, it's just a send component ID. That means nothing will happen if we would run the debugger, for example. We would just press the button, but nothing will happen. That means that the magic must be in the ESPHome YAML file. Same with this light button. We will see what that says. Nothing there either. So same there, the magic is in the YAML file. Pressing all lights changes the text on that component to sound, and at the same time ESPHome changes these two buttons to show, or these are actually not buttons, they're just called crop, because in my setup you can't press them. There's no function when pressing them, so there's just a crop. If you remember, when using a button you can use the crop image feature. This is basically the same thing, but there's nothing's going to happen when you press it. So what basically happens when you press all lights is that we change this crop attribute, or the picture attribute of this crop component to, we're changing it to 2 probably. because we want the speakers. So if we change from all lights to sound, ESPHome changes this attribute to picture 2. We could actually look at that in the YAML file. So we'll try and search for this component in the YAML file. It's ID 8 on page 2. So I think we can search for ID 8. Page 2 ID 8, I call it the mode button, NSP mode, right? And on release, we want it to change between all lights and sound. So if it's all lights, it changes to sound. If it's sound, it changes to all lights. And a script is also executed. Just quickly look at that script. Update mode. Here we have the script. So when pressing the button, this script executes, and we can actually see here that we're changing this attribute that we have been looking at in the Nextion Editor. So pressing this one, we want to change the picture for these two, and they're called, what are they called? They're called Bright and Kelvin. Looking at the YAML file, home, that's the page, what the page is named. Looking at, so the page is called home. That's how we reference the button. We say home, bright, want it to change to 1, Kelvin to 1, and here when changing to sound, we want it to change to 2. So ESPHome sends a message to the NSPanel to change that attribute. So what would happen if we did that in ESPHome then? No, in the Nextion Editor. The exact same thing, and we've already done that, but I'm doing it again, changing this to 2, and that's what's happening. So it's just a lot of this happening. It's not that super complicated. You just need to learn all the different attributes that you can work with, and yeah, I mean the commands that you're using and all of that. But when you have all those tools, it's super fun and pretty easy. Looking at the rest of the buttons on this page, we can see that there's nothing exciting happening here. We just have the touch press event and the release event that we've been talking about earlier. And what that does is just to tell ESPHome that a button has been pressed, a button has been released. The code is in ESPHome. We can just quickly look at the YAML file again for this button, for example. It's ID 3 on page 2. Search for ID 3. Page 2. Page 2. Okay, so this is button 1 up, and here's a bit of code to tell ESPHome what to do. I think we're done with page 2, actually, the home page. That's not much more than that. We have this button as well. It's just used to change which room we're in. It just changes this text, and the same here. It's not done in the TFT file. It's done in ESPHome. And this is what most of the HTML file looks like. It's just a number of pages with a lot of buttons doing kind of the same thing. And the code in ESPHome, of course, is a bit different, but it's the same concept. I was saying before that I would like to show you the different methods that I use to get data from the Nextion display to ESPHome. This is one of the ways, just using the touch press event, touch release event. Good. Moving on, settings page. Oh, we have to go back to homepage. Sorry, I forgot one thing, because this is the first time we're seeing these, so we should go through what that is. It's about the screensaver settings that I've set up. We're seeing two new components that we haven't seen before. This one, the first one, is a timer. We have that somewhere here, timer. And the second one, it's something called a touch cap, which is a very very useful thing. We have that here as well, touch cap. And it's really good documentation. If you want to read about what these things do, you can go to the Nextion Editor guide. You can read about all the different components that you can use. Looking at the timer, it's just pretty basic. It's 30 seconds, and when the timer ends, we decide what will happen in the timer event. In this case, we want the screen to dim down to 0. It turns completely black, and we want this P event to disappear if it was on the screen when it went into screensaver mode. And I want it to change to the page that is called Screensaver. And this is the Screensaver page. It's just a black page. Going back, because we need to talk about the touch cap before talking about the Screensaver page. The touch cap is a component. It's a non-visible component. You can't see it. You just see it here. It's not on the screen. What the touch cap does is that it stores the ID value of the last button being pressed. So, for example, if the last button that was pressed was this B table button, it's ID 2, then the touch cap would change its value to 2. With the touch cap is that although it's a non-visual component, you can't see it, it has a touch press event and a touch release event. When are those events triggered? They're triggered as soon as the value changes in the touch cap. That means as soon as you press whatever button on that page, you can trigger a touch press or touch release event on the touch cap as well. That gives us a pretty good way of creating a screensaver. We will look at the code here then. If I press this table light button, an event will be triggered for that component, but an event will also be triggered for the touch cap component. So then in the touch release event for the touch cap component, I've put in this code, sleep display enable 1. What's that then? Sleep display, that's the name of this component, object name sleep display, and enable 1 is an attribute for that component. Enable 1. When the timer is set up like this, it's enable 1, it means that when the page is loaded, the timer will start straight away, count to 30. What sleep display enable 1 does is just to reset the timer, which means that as soon as someone presses whichever button on the display, the timer will reset itself through the touch cap release event. That means that it's only if someone hasn't touched the screen for 30 seconds, we will go to the page Screensaver, because this is the timer event and it says page Screensaver. That means go to Screensaver page. Boom. Looking at the Screensaver page then, and the code that's in there. Look at the pre-initialize, nothing. Post-initialize, what's this? Looks advanced. We'll talk about that soon. Touch press, touch release. It just says page 2, okay. This is just some old code. I don't use that anymore. I've changed that. I think I've changed it to be here instead. But let's start with the touch release event. So we're on the Screensaver page right now, right? It's black, it's dimmed to 0. I press it, nothing happens because I don't have anything on the touch press event. Touch release though, page 2. Whoop! We go to page 2. So what's this weird hex code then? We need a scenario. Think about it like this. We've been using the display, and this display is situated in kitchen. Therefore, the first page or this text component should always say kitchen when we return from the Screensaver, and the components should also always be updated to the state that the components in the kitchen are currently in, right? But let's say we change the page to bedroom. We enter the bedroom because we want to control some things there, and then we leave this panel, take a cup of coffee or something. This page has the same timer component and touch cap component as page 2. That is on all pages. So it will go to the screensaver page pretty soon. And when it goes to the screensaver page, we know that there's a pre-initialize phase. You went to screensaver page now. The pre-initialize phase, it has gone into the post-initialize phase. We know that. So this has been executed now. The question is, what does it do? This is a way for me to send an event to ESPHome to make something happen, to make ESPHome execute some kind of code without someone touching the display. So what this does is, as soon as the screensaver page is loaded, we enter the post-initialize phase. These commands are executed, and it's basically commands, and they're sent to ESPHome just like if someone had touched the screen. And what it means is that 65 means, I've written it here in the comments, so 65 means touch event, 3 page 3, 7 it's a component ID on that page, 1 means press, 0 release. So press, release. So what's this then? Page 3 component ID 7. Looking at the settings page, page 3 component ID 7. That's this one. And right now, actually, I'm not sure that you actually need this component for this to work. The important thing is that the equivalent or corresponding component exists in ESPHome. So we'll check out ESPHome, the YAML file. We said ID 7, right? Page 3, I named that click screensaver. Invisible button used to trigger reset to start page when display enters sleep mode. And the code that I want to execute is basically just to change the room name back to the standard room for that device, and I wanted to switch back to all lights if someone had used the sound settings. That's the standard first page. And these two scripts are executed. Update room just updates the icons for ceiling light and table light to the correct states for those lights in that room. And update mode kind of does the same. It updates the brightness and the Kelvin to the states that they're in. The thing is that I've tried this in a couple of different ways, and there's another way of doing this. If we copy this button to the screensaver page, I will show you another way of doing this and the downside of doing it that way. I'm just gonna make it look a bit better. A solid color, we want it to be black, boom, and remove the 3D thing. Okay, and we can just make it super tiny, because no one is supposed to touch this button, okay? But there is a button there. Looking at the code again, there is a function in Nextion Editor that is called click. So if I write click, and the object's name is click, and it searches for components on that page we're at, and it finds click SS, click screensaver, and just a comma, and then we want it to be on the release event, so 0. This would have the exact same effect, or not the same effect, but basically we need to check the ID, the component ID here. So it's 1, and it's on page 11. So we would have to change the YAML file to 11 and 1 here. We would change to page ID 11, component ID 1. Then the exact same thing would happen using this feature called click. The downside with using click is that you can't use click on another page for that same component, if you understand what I mean. So in Nextion Editor, you talk about a global or local component. So looking at this settings page here, where this click button, it's a global. I've set it to global. You can have local and global, but I've set it to global. Let's say we would want to trigger a click event on the click button that I had on the settings page, this one. we would try and right click. The page name was settings, and we would choose click SS, bam, and release event. Okay, that's cool. And we'll try to validate that, debug. We get an error because you're not allowed to use click on global buttons. You can't use click on a button component that's on another page. Okay, I will try to compare these two. This solution makes us able to have one component in ESPHome that is waiting for this event to happen, and then we can trigger the code that we have on that component in ESPHome. Using this method makes us able to trigger this event from all the pages in the same way, just having this exact same code on all the pages that we would like to trigger this event to ESPHome. But in ESPHome, we just have one single component. Using the click solution, if I would like to trigger this exact same thing from another page, I would need another click component such as this on the other page that I would like to trigger that event. And since that's a new component on another page, since you couldn't use them as global components, you would have to have another component in ESPHome. So we would take more components in ESPHome, and the memory of the ESPHome has its limits, so it's important to use as few components in ESPHome as possible. And using this nice little method of print age makes it really easy to have few components in ESPHome, but trigger a lot of events from different pages and all that in the TFT file. Okay, did you get that? I don't know. I hope you did. Global and local components, that's important. Looking at this, for example. No, let's look at, I don't know, living room, TV. Okay, it's global. Set all your components global. You might as well do that. And what does that do? So most of the time we're at the home page, right? And just remove the IDs, they're so ugly. Okay, home page, right. Someone turns the TV on. The TV component is in living room. Here's a TV component. So if the vScope is global, the component will update its state, although it's not on the page that we're currently on. If the vScope would have been local, it would not update itself. So when we switched to living room, we would not have the correct state of the TV. All right, so that means that we would have to use some code to get all the states for the components on that page and update them. Not a good way to do it. Set them to globally. Back to the settings page, just some code here on the alarm button. Something happening in the TFT file. Pressing that button will change to page 10. Display page 10. The alarm page looks like this. Okay. Last thing on the settings page, I have a upload button. Pressing that will start uploading the TFT file to the screen. And of course, all that magic is done in the YAML file. Looking at the YAML file, we can do that. We can find this component, ID3, object name 3.2, ID3. I'm getting really tired and confused here. So page 3, object name, ID3, 33. Man. Okay, there it is. Page 3, component ID 3. On press, ID display 1, upload TFT. So it says upload TFT. Okay, how does it know where to find or which server to locate the TFT file? It says here display. This is the settings for the Nextion display. TFT URL. URL. You can just steal that one. Paste that in there. And there's the TFT file for downloading. And it's, as I showed you before, home public There it is, and that's because I have this HTTP server, super HTTP server up and running. Moving on, we're entering the rooms. Here, just basic buttons. Coffee order, just a button that changes page. So yeah, a different way of changing page, just writing page, coffee on release event. That means that we're changing to the coffee page, which looks like that. I love that page. It's one of my favorite pages. Okay, going back to kitchen. These buttons on in top, this one is used to go back to page 2. And actually, I mean, this is a better way of doing it. Page coffee refers to the name of the page. Page 2 refers to the ID of the page, or the order that you have the page. So if you change the order, this button does something else. That's not good. It's better to say the page name, refer to the page name. So here, go back a room, and this one is the next room, and here I use the room names instead. That's much better. Do that. So looking at each room, kitchen, living room, bedroom, they all have this vacuum cleaning icon at the same place, all the pages. And the purpose of this button is that if you're in the kitchen, enter kitchen, press that button, the vacuum cleaner will start cleaning the kitchen, obviously, and going back, switching to living room, entering living room, touching that button component, the vacuum cleaner will start cleaning the living room. So looking at this component, you can see that I haven't ticked in these boxes, send component ID, send component ID, because we've done that on all the other buttons so far, because that's how we tell ESPHome that someone has pressed this button. But we don't want to do that, because then we need to have 5 components in ESPHome. It's better to do it manually in the touch release event in the TFT file here. So we use this print age hex stuff, where we say that 65 is a touch event, 3 is the page, 8 is the component ID of the component on that page, 1 means a press event, and 0 a release event. I mean, you don't have to have both of them, actually, you can just have one of them. The important thing is what you say in the YAML file, on release or on press. Looking at this then, 65, 3, 8. Looking at the living room, same here. We're not using the send component ID thing, but we're having the exact same code, 3, 8. Same here, 3, 8. Same here, 3, 8. So we have 5 different buttons on different pages, but every time we touch them, no matter which one we touch, we send the exact same event to ESPHome. Page 3, component ID 8. Looking at the YAML file, boom, 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 ID 8, page 3, click vacuum. I've called it click vacuum because I used a click. I used click before, but this is a better way. So looking at the code here then, on release, that's what I was talking about before. We actually don't need this row because that means press, and we just need the release event. We just need one event to trigger something in ESPHome, but it's there. You can use both of them. Looking at the code then, the only thing that we actually do is checking a variable that's called current room. And if that variable is kitchen, ESPHome knows that we were in the kitchen when we touched the vacuum cleaner icon. Therefore, we want to clean the kitchen. And therefore, a MQTT message is published to the MQTT broker saying, oh, vacuum kitchen on, and then OpenHab takes care of the rest. This is a perfect example of just using one component in ESPHome, but being able to do a lot of things, right? And I'll have an even better example in the next room. We're done with kitchen, living room. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I said that I have an even better example of resource efficiency. And that's here. So let's go through that just super quick so we can finish soon. Okay, we're using the exact same method here, but in this case, we're actually, for the first time, sending a variable to ESPHome. So a variable from the Nextion display to ESPHome. Super good thing to know how to do that. I have an old Samsung TV that OpenHAB can talk to with one of the bindings, that they're called bindings in OpenHAB. The good thing with that old TV is that it can understand just normal, super easy string commands. So there's a string item in OpenHAB that I just change, and then the TV will take that command. So it understands like on, off, vol up, vol down, mute, HDMI, TV, stuff like that. So the only thing that I need then is to get those kind of commands from the Nextion display to ESPHome. ESPHome then can send these string states on a specific MQTT topic, and OpenHAB will do the rest. Super easy. This is the first time we're transmitting a variable, so let's look at that. Here it is. It's called VATV, and it's a string variable. Looking at the first button here then, the TV on-off button, we can see that we're not using the send component ID, right? So we're using the code here to transmit data from the Nextion display to ESPHome. And we're checking after the press, is the component on, then we want the string to be power on. After the press, if the component value is 0, it's off. We want the variable, VATV variable, to become power off. So now we have the correct information in the variable. Now we just need to push that from the Nextion display to ESPHome. To do that, we're using this little cool thing. And if you look at the ESPHome documentation, if you look at the Nextion text sensor component, if you scroll down, you get something called Nextion custom text sensor protocol. This is what we're using. You recognize this? This. I don't remember what this means, so we need to check that. Yeah, 92 tells the library this is a text sensor. Amazing. And then we just follow these instructions, and looking at the code that I've made, we talk about the component, the name of the component, and then here we send the value of vatv.text. Look at this one. vatv.text. That's the value of the string. And if you remember, here in the code, we changed vatv.text to power on. So either way, we're sending power on or power off here to the ESPHome. It's amazing. And we should look at this equivalent component in ESPHome. It's called VATV. Okay, so in this case, we're not using the component ID, we're using the component name, VATV, as soon as VATV receives a value. On value, we want something to happen. This is what we want to happen. We're sending a MQTT message to the MQTT broker. It gets received by OpenHAB. And what are we actually transmitting? We're transmitting on this topic. We're sending X is the value that ESPHome received from the Nextion Editor. Power on or power off. And it goes to OpenHAB. OpenHAB does the rest. TV turns on or off. It's amazing. We're using one component, but we're having 6 buttons in the Nextion Editor in the TFT file. That's amazing. That's resource efficiency. Moving on to the bedroom. Really nothing new here. This is one part that I could do it in a better way, because here I'm using 3 button components for each of the curtains. But it's the same thing here. My curtains in OpenHAB are string items, so I could do the exact same thing with this. So instead of 6 buttons, it would be just 2 in ESPHome. Just sending a string variable. Entryway, nothing. Bathroom, nothing. Okay, we're getting closer to the end. I really need to finish because I need to go. So, we'll see. Coffee, exact same thing here. Depending on which of these coffee buttons I press, we're sending a variable to ESPHome. So ESPHome can deliver that to OpenHub. We're using one component in ESPHome, 8 buttons in Nextion Editor. Coffee, just a normal button, returns to page 2 after pressing it. Okay, alarm, we're at the last page. I think we can actually finish. Oh man. Because as I said, I need to go. The alarm page, we can look at that. I have that on the settings page. Alarm, you need to put in 4 numbers.
Wrong code, get yourself together.
Okay, it's pretty nice. So on the 4th number you press, it sends a variable to ESPHome. ESPHome turns it to the OpenHub. It's basically the same thing that we've been talking about on the last pages, but it's a bit more code. It's pretty straightforward. We have a couple of variables here. So a place variable that just keeps track on how many numbers we put in. It's 0 from the beginning. If you press 1, a placeholder place value variable changes to 1. If you press another number, the second one, it changes to 2, and so on. If you use the clear button, the place value goes to 0 again, and it also changes the text value of these components. So T0 to T3, so these ones. So when you push a number, the text changes on that component. You push in 4 numbers, and then a variable is created, transmits the data to ESPHome. We can just look at the code where we've put in 4 numbers. So at this point, we've put in 4 numbers. We're creating a string variable here with all the numbers that we put in, and we're doing some converting here from a string variable to a number variable called va0. Put in the numbers, and then we send them off to ESPHome. This is why it's 91 here, so I guess that's not a text component, it's a number variable then. And in the same way, we're pushing that data to ESPHome. Okay, man, we're done with part 2. I'll think about part 3. We'll see what you think about this. Hopefully it's not like an hour-long episode. It took a lot longer than I thought it would do. I hope you got something out of it. I think there's a lot of good things here. If you want to start, just look at the files. I've put in a lot of comments in my YAML file as well. So if you have some experience of coding, I think you will understand everything. Just understanding the concepts of how this works is a really good start. Let's call it a day. I need to go. We should lower the flag before ending. Google. Hala flaggan. It's 20 minutes early. She should go down when the sun sets. But I think this is good. Okay? If you like it, press the button and all those things. Follow me, whatever. See you. Bye bye.